What's up, everybody? Rory and I are back for episode 4 of Midjourney Fast Hours podcast. Welcome back. Always feels good to be here. Rory, what's happening, buddy?
Nothing much, man. Just, kicking it through the rest of the week here. Got a lot of stuff going on, of course. Never a dull moment. Just, reminiscing over heavyweights over here because your hat is just fire. So,
If you can't see it, it says buddy on it. So, yeah, little heavyweights, little like 90s vintage throwback nostalgia for you. I mean, if you don't recall, this is one of Ben Stiller's first big movies.
Probably. Are we dating ourselves with this one? People even
think
remember
so.
heavyweights?
I think so.
That was childhood classic, though.
Jerry.
Goes
Jerry.
Get on the scale. Get off the scale. My favorite lines of all time.
Oh,
like
epic, dude. So epic.
Oh, man. Goes right up there with like Little Giants and Sandlot for me in terms of like my childhood.
Man, we are speaking the same language right now. Absolutely. Those are all classics. I mean, heavyweights, you had Keenan. Keenan was in heavyweights. You also had
Goldberg.
the actor Goldberg, yeah. I forget his name.
No one ever knows his name.
It's just
Mighty
Goldberg.
Ducks.
Yeah, Mighty Ducks
Forever.
Goldberg. Oh,
That's
dude.
a good one, man. What happened to those movies? Like, what happened to, kids' movies that were fun like that? I don't know. It seems like that whole genre disappeared.
Why is the golden age of everything 80s and 90s?
I don't know.
That's my question.
You're just ripping. That was
Yeah.
good stuff. Mighty
It
Ducks
really was.
D2? Come on. That's classic. Everyone knows Queen from that song. If you were in your first 7 to 8 years of life, you now know Queen because of, D2 Mighty Ducks. So, We Will Rock You. Can't get much better than that. That was
You can't.
epic moment in time.
Even D1, dude. You got Gordon, who his probation includes him coaching a youth hockey team. How how epic
Exceptional. Exceptional. The Bash Brothers, very timely.
Look how we just segued that in beautifully.
Look at that.
Yeah, so we're back, guys. We are back. Thanks for hanging with us as we just sort of reminisce there. But we got a great episode, I think, for today. We're going to try to jam this into our usual hour because staying true to the name, Midjourney Fast Hours, and we've got a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about specifically all the ways that you can take ideas and use Midjourney to realize their outcomes. So all the different use cases that are available that either Rory and I have done ourselves or we've thought about, or just the way other people are using these things, and then kind of break that out into how could you use this for brands and businesses and maybe in your professional life, and then how could you also use this for personal gain and monetization, because there are obviously both ways to leverage the technology, and I think both are equally fascinating to think about because there just are so many ways.
100%. So many ways. When I first started, I remember looking up stuff on YouTube. We'll come full circle now. How are people actually making money with this? Because it wasn't necessarily good, but I remember the first was print on demand. You had to jump through a lot of hoops back then to make something look good and get it print on demand. But people were doing it. Phone cases, T-shirts. We're gonna go a little deeper than that today, a little bit more robust, I think. But that was some of the first stuff. It was it was the first idea everyone has when they're going to start a product. T-shirts, right?
True.
That's the way it goes. It's let's make T-shirts. Yeah, okay. It's a little bit harder than it seems. You can make the T-shirts, but then you got to market them and actually find an audience that wants to buy them, which I think is underrated. It's like these.
That's so funny, dude. That's so true.
Right? It's like these affiliate plays. I see this on Instagram a lot, not to go too off track here. But, if anyone's familiar with affiliate marketing, basically, you can click through and you're just driving eyeballs from one site to another. But, there's all these influencers that are like, this is how I make $9,000 a day by driving people to Amazon. And it's all you need to do is just comment Amazon and I'll send you my guide. And, everyone's like, oh my God, I want to make $9,000 a day. Yeah, they don't tell you the person that's driving, all that traffic and has all those sales, has 9 million followers. That's the hard part. not the driving people to Amazon. It's getting the 9 million followers.
Yeah, you got to build the community first, which
oh my God.
You can't do that overnight.
You certainly cannot. Not with this LinkedIn algorithm, at least. Not right now.
So brutal. So
Killer.
brutal, guys. What are we doing here? Oh, dude, it's just so bad. We talk about this all the time. But, we reminisce nostalgically about last summer, and the kind of impression, share, and eyeballs that you could get on a given post. And just
The good
now,
days.
Oh, so brutal. So brutal. But yeah, man, let's get into like all the different ways that maybe people can turn ideas into ways that are actually, that are actionable for business, for personal gain. So like maybe we start with how we've used them in the past, like, and maybe that brings us to sort of like the inflection point of us going even further into Midjourney ourselves and just why we're so passionate about it. Like how did that start to come to life for you? Maybe in the early days, and what did you kind of realize with the use cases specifically?
Yeah, man. Well, I think, we talked about this in like the first episode where I was mentioning a lot of this was like kind of started with email marketing. We just needed assets. I mean, that was just the end of the road there. We had no other option. We just didn't have anything else. So we kind of had to create them. But yeah, that was kind of like the eye opener, like, oh, they work and no one's like emailing us saying, you guys got to stop sending us AI images. Like, we don't like this for our products. We're not going to buy from you because you're using AI images. So that was kind of like, oh, the market says it's okay. They're still buying. They're still clicking through. It wasn't like we were doing anything revolutionary. Actually, some of the stuff was pretty funny at the time when I go and look back at it now. Like, it was so comically bad. But it worked, right? I think a lot of it was there was a novelty to it, like the novelty to the aesthetic. Like kind of when you think about how CGI came onto the scene and it was like, oh, that's different. Doesn't look like, Jurassic Park looks a certain way. And then you get the newer Jurassic Parks and you're like, that looks different. That doesn't look like it used to. So there was definitely like that aspect of it. That sort of pushed into a lot more directions where, it's like, where else can this work? But my head initially went to mobile, right? Because we didn't have like a good breadth of upscalers at the time. So the upscalers weren't there to make things bigger, to put them on things like, actually, they really had trouble even with carousel covers back in the day. That was 1500 pixels by 1200 pixels. And that was like, it's still blurry. So, my head always went to mobile. It's like, what can we do with mobile? Can we do organic? Can we do ads? Can we make things at least look, passable in that sense? Obviously, we went down the rabbit hole on photorealistic prompting last week. That's where we went, to try and get it there to look like that. But also, like, there's been shifts. I think everyone wanted to make things look great. And then there was like this movement towards making things look kind of weird and different and unique. Because that's really what the key benefit to me has always been. Like, how do we stop the scroll and how do we give you something that you haven't seen today? That's really the impetus of it all. So I think organic social is great for it because it can accompany a ton of different things, whether that's, in a carousel on Instagram, whether that's like, doing B-roll for a TikTok reel or an Instagram reel, kind of visual storytelling when you're creating organic or video content. So that's obviously a good use case for it. But there's so many that we can get into. Let me rip it over to you real quick so you can get some words in. So I shut up.
Well, I know. I mean, I think you brought up some really great points, and I think email, social, slides, like those things are really low risk as well. I think it's fascinating that you started with sort of like this email approach, mobile approach too, because smaller size images, people aren't dissecting these things too much. It's more of like a attention grabber or scroll stopper, if you will. And it's there as a complementary purpose, and it's a very singular purpose. And so like those to me feel like very low risk use cases. For me, we talked about this again, like I think this was our first episode where we were just talking about how we got started with Midjourney, like what drove that sort of obsession, that nerdy obsession that we have. For me, the story went back to the idea of applying this in my role, my full-time role, which at that time was leading a marketing team. And we had no assets that were, that really felt like us because we were in a niche. And so this idea that we could create images that felt more like us and, were pretty passable really at that time even, because some of it kind of had like a little bit of this illustrative look. And so I don't think people really knew to necessarily consider it photorealistic, if you know what I mean. So I think that also was a nice little balance and way to introduce it. But using Midjourney for things like website images, blog images, icons, illustrations, slides, we use that for customer events and some of the things that we would show on demos, like all that stuff that's more complementary to the brand at large. I mean, those all felt pretty low risk and great ways to stand out because in any, I guess, field, even in your field in the agency side, but mine on the B2B side, you're just used to seeing all the same images. And, there's that running joke of like, so-and-so's using Sally, on their webpage, and like 50 other brands use Sally on their webpage, right? And she's a happy customer. She's got this to say, right? And so things like that were just eye-openers immediately. So when you think about all the different use cases that come to mind for something like Midjourney, we're not just talking about photorealism. I mean, we've talked about storyboarding before. We've talked about mood boards. We've talked about UX, UI design ideas. We've talked about, oh God, help me out, dude. I mean, just like everything.
That was one of the interesting ones, was the UI UX designs. I remember when that was like a big thing, when, it was kind of trending on social, but I was like, cool, everyone's doing like, Notion dashboards and stuff like that. I was like, can you create an email template? Because that'd be cool. So that's how we started to get a lot more creative with our template design. Like the thing, this is very email marketing centric, but at the same time, you don't realize how many times you use the same template, and it could either be a good thing or a bad thing. If it doesn't work and you need to create more, they take time. So creating a template that you can utilize over and over again is not something that is simply done. And from the agency side, it has to get client approval. So it has to fit brand standards. It has to go through a bunch of rounds of revisions. So, we started generating some really unique ones on there to give us ideas. And then we also started playing around with removing stuff and basically taking those templates and turning them into templates. So you can actually go and generate like an email placeholder template where it had, colors and unique different ways to add the products to it, so that you had like these little guidelines almost, and you could just remove whatever imagery or text was in there and then just add your own. That was an interesting way, either that or mimic it ourselves. So it was a way to get inspiration, which sounds like, again, everyone knows that you can use AI for inspiration at this point, but we were actually taking it and just kind of building off of it. So it's a starting point. Again, like always this piece to a whole mentality, because that was really important. Again, especially...
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, not everything has to be a finished product when you take it out of Midjourney. There are certain cases where, yes, like ideally, it'd be great if you could just create something and use it right away. Is that the reality sometimes? Maybe not, especially like maybe for more of a business use case. So you have to think about, what other tools go along with that, which I think is an interesting conversation. And maybe that's something we get into today too, is, the workflow of it all. Like, are there other tools that you stack with it in your process? What are those tools and why do you use them? So it is fascinating to think about like the rough ideas, anything from mock-ups to product visualizations to illustrations to, we used it for trade show design. God, I mean, there's just so many, right? Like mascot design, cartoons, illustrations, like all these things I think are just fascinating to think about and kind of get lost in the sauce when you think about Midjourney, because you and I specifically, we talk a lot about photorealism, and sometimes we kind of need to be pulled back and reminded too that, hey, like, are we not thinking about how we could have used it here too? That's just important to note, because not everybody's trying to use it for photorealism.
Yeah, everyone likes to, there's a big part of the community that just likes to create, right? They just want to create, and they want to create whatever they like. It has there's no end goal for it, only for personal satisfaction. But I look at it in terms of like when we started doing this stuff, then we realized we could implant it into operations. That's when it became really powerful, just because it was a time saver, right? If we're spending 2 hours on something and we could spend 10 minutes on it, and that 10 minutes was actually high quality and not crap, then it was like, okay, we can really start to, the compounding effects over time. That's where it's going to help. So, like that template idea, right? That was just to us to have templates, right? Like we needed templates. That didn't essentially bleed into the rest of it until we figured out we could use that in onboarding, where it was like, okay, we have signed a new client. Now, we have to get the initial design sort of like consultation out of the way, if you want to call it that, how we basically align their brand values in our design style. So then we could use, instead of like, here's the other emails that we've created for other brands that have literally no relevance to you. Instead, we could go mock up these things real quick. This can happen on a kickoff call, which is like 2 days after a contract signed. Here's like 4 or 5 templates that we think might work for you based on, what's worked in the past, and also tailored. It's like a client experience thing too, where that helps. And, or, we look at something like Black Friday coming around the corner. I say that now because we were thinking about Black Friday like today. Like August 1 was when it's like, okay, time to kick it into gear, because September gets crazy. October, you're basically too late. So
probably one of the most important dates for you every year.
Yeah. And that was like, again, okay, we have Black Friday coming up. We're going to run an amplified amount of campaigns of what we normally do. So instead of running 4 to 5, maybe 6 to 7 campaigns a month, we're going to be at like 14 or 15. We kind of need some stuff that's a little bit different. So we're coming up on that time. Here's what we're thinking. Here's a couple different, options for you. Choose your own path, essentially. And then it was just a good way to have interaction, and also it's low risk in terms of design. So we didn't have to waste a lot of time mocking up these big ass templates. That would take forever for designers, and then the clients would be like, yeah, I don't like that. I want to like change put the text on the right side, not the left side. So like shit like that could be really turned around and not just go put the designers back to work on something trivial. So little things like that.
Let's unpack that prompt template sort of idea as a whole for a second, because it seems like you and I have sort of utilized that in a similar but different way. And I think that applies to a lot of these business use cases as well, especially if it's a client or you're using it for somebody in a larger capacity. Like the idea is to ultimately create something that is repeatable, that can be basically front loaded with the work and then applied over and over with less effort, right? So it's that idea that you're doing 90% of the work up front and then 10% after that. How did you come across that idea to land on a template? And are there any like things that you learned in particular with that idea of using templates in your business use cases?
Totally. It's one thing for me to do it. It's another thing to have a whole team do it, right? So when I was really the first one taking the shots at it, and it was like, okay, it's like science. It's like a science experiment, right? Like it can only be turned into an actual like physical law if it's repeatable, and it's repeatable by everyone. So, I could have this one prompt and it works for me, it doesn't work for anyone else. Like if it only works one time, it's pointless. So it's like drilling it down to the main points of like where the emphasis is and like these prompts where you want them, so that you can then like assign values or like terms to it, like a prompt formula. That's when we start to like kind of break it down. Because if it was just me and I didn't care about doing it for someone else or teaching someone else how to do it, I probably would have never had to use them. Probably would have just been like, let's wing it, let's go for it. But when you have to teach other people how to do it, they need like a roadmap. So this was kind of like, all right, I tested these prompt formulas. This is what works for this. These are the types of keywords. This is the type of format. Now you can go and, change the colors, change the, the structure type, or like, what are some of these other elements in here, but keep X, Y, Z. So it was a good way to get people off the ground, but also to teach them how each little individual aspect of a prompt affected the output. So I would say that was integral in everything, because without it, we would just been like kind of shooting in the dark and there was no starting point. We're talking about time optimization and a lot of this stuff. That helps. It helps people get a starting point, start generating, understand where the issues are within their initial generations, edit quickly, get to something more usable. Because we all know you can you can just stay in a like a funk with prompting for like, an hour or two. You're like, everything sucks.
I think that's fascinating too, because we've talked a lot about prompt structure, mostly in the last episode, but I think prompt structure really was a byproduct of this need for templates and predictability and consistency, because otherwise it's not necessarily a thing. It's not like you have to use that, but when you're thinking about using it in mass or with teams, like you just mentioned, it becomes a prerequisite to ultimately get all of the potential ROI out of shifting your workflow, your operations in that direction.
100%. It's hard to, like, you can't really have this. I talk about this often. There's a couple different stages of adoption in the AI workplace. To me, there's like, it starts with like, you discover tools individually, you work on the side. The second stage is you start to use it in your job, but like you're the only one doing it, or you're just doing it in your own way. Stage 3 is kind of, to me, like where everyone is utilizing it, but no one's doing it in like an organized fashion. There's no SOPs. It's just like, you're over there doing your thing, I'm over here doing my thing. No one's taught us how to do anything, and we're just kind of like winging it, which is where I think a lot of people are right now. Then it's like, it's that next step where you start to kind of collate everything, make the SOPs or the standard operating procedures for anyone, who's not up with the corporate acronym lingo. And I hate that I have to use that term in my real life, but I do.
Hey Rory, let me stop you right there for a second. You specifically have talked about this on a number of different podcasts or speaking engagements. You've done some of these talks. I think it's fascinating to think about the volume game that you created in doing that, and then also the operationalization.
Yes.
Operationalization? Did I say that right? I don't know that I've ever said that like that. Anyway, yeah,
One more time. We got this.
Operationalization. Got it.
That's good.
This is a fascinating conversation to have also for people that are using Midjourney. They're using it more often and they're trying to apply it more toward a business case. Can you give us like some of the things that were either unlocks for you as you were going about this, or like any mistakes that you made along the way that you wish you would do differently if you got that chance again, as you're thinking about integrating AI image gen into your processes from a company or a team standpoint?
I would say it's the biggest problem to me isn't that people don't know how to use it or integrate it. It's they don't understand problem identification. That is, luckily, I spent a lot of time in sales picking through people's email channels to try and find holes so that I could sell them. It's like, oh, here's the issue. It's like, you think it's X, but it's really Y, which I wasn't lying. It was, people are like, just to give an example as to how I'm thinking about this from a whole general perspective. Email marketing, typically you're driving traffic to a website. There's like a email capture that comes up, a pop-up window. Everyone hates them, but that's how you sign people up for your list, right? Now, if you're driving traffic and then, the email sign up on the back end is super low, then it's not the email that doesn't work because your emails on the back end, you're sending to the same people all the time. You have no new blood, it's like a river that's run dry. There's like nothing new coming in, so you're just sending the same thing to the same people over and over again. So everyone would be like, my email sucks. And like a lot of times I look back there and be like, well, your email doesn't really suck. It's the pop-up window. Like you have traffic, you have decent emails, but there's just no new people, so you just have a fatigued list. So really the pop-up window is a variable. That same type of thought process when you look at an operation where it's like, okay, we're looking at, this whole workflow from creative brief down to the actual execution. It's like, where are the actual choke points? Because you can find places where it's like, what takes the most time in this entire process, right? And then everyone will be like, it's the design. It's like, yeah, it's the design, of course. But are the copywriters not getting you copy quick enough? Are there too many copy edits? Because if you've ever worked in design, if you have to go and remove copy or add copy, it can change the whole design. So, sometimes it's not exactly just the design's fault, design team's fault. It could be the copywriting. That could go back. You finish sending a finished design to your client, and they're like, we don't like this copy, scrap it. Add this, take this out, do this. And then designers have to go and rework the entire visual aesthetic of it because it doesn't fit with the new copy that they put in. So really long answer to say that I think people have an issue with problem identification more than they have finding solutions for it. Because once you do, then you can use a tool. For example, one more is, when we started realizing we could direct photo shoots with Midjourney, it was way easier because we didn't have to rely on telling a photographer what we were looking for in like an arbitrary fashion. It was more so like, we need these types of shots. You can do a mood board on Pinterest or whatever and be like, we kind of want these shots. Or we could tell them basically exactly what we want by utilizing Midjourney and trim probably a week or two off the time frame from ideation to execution. Again, it was just like, where are these little areas that we can help? Where can we find 10-minute wins? Not $1 million wins. Can we find 10-minute wins? And that'll lead us, to the $1 million wins. So that's kind of that was very pontificating. We're using big words here today, guys.
Ooh, they're tough. They are so tough. No, I think that's great. We've got really good perspectives on this because we lived it and we sort of operationalized it. For me, it was the idea that I could... our biggest problem was finding on-brand assets that felt like us and then having that access for everybody in the company that could grab images, whether that's the marketing team, whether that's the sales team, CS team, because you get into these small organizations, there is no designer. There's no designer. You've got brand guidelines, but guess what? People aren't following them. And what happens is because there's no designer and you can't necessarily give tasks to somebody that also has 50 other tasks where design is just one part of their job. People then take it upon themselves to create things. And that's where the brand starts to really sort of degrade because you've got different qualities of the brand, inconsistencies, maybe the voice isn't the same. Like some of those key points, it was this idea that I could create these things in bulk, provide this on-brand custom library that my team could access for all these things, right? And just some of the use cases that we already talked about. Social, ads, emails, blog images, all those things were instantly grabbable and we didn't have to go find them. We didn't have to do the whole stock photography game, which you and I just love to blast stock photography, but we all know that pain. If you've ever spent time creating visuals of any kind, it's just, that's what you start with because it's either that or you've got the professional photographer like Rory mentioned. Each has their own problems. They all have cons. And so there's this space in between where AI can play a large role. And that was really my inflection point was just like, I don't like the stock photography. Plus it takes up way too much time. The professional photographer, I don't have the budget for. And even if I did, it doesn't excite me that I got to think about all the logistical planning behind it. I got to find the photographer. Where are they at? Where are we shooting? Who are the people we're shooting? Do they have the right clothes? What's the location? And after all that, you get a finite number of images. So once you go through those, then what do you do? So
you're done. You run through them, you use them 100 million times, and everything looks the same. That's exactly what happens.
And not in a good way.
Interesting. How are you? So then, if you didn't have a designer, Like, who was actually creating the materials? Was it like just, social media
Me.
team or you? Okay, I was going to ask, was it just you then?
I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I think it's like you almost build a team with people that have different strengths than you, and then you might be good at a few different things. So, as the leader of that team, I had to let go of some things that I knew somebody could do better than me. The problem is we didn't have anybody that was a better designer or brand person than me, so I took that on. If we had somebody better, I could obviously offset that. But that was just one of the many roles that I had as a team leader, and probably not one of the more impactful roles from a revenue standpoint. And so I think about these small marketing teams, and I have just so much empathy there because you do have so many priorities. And marketing is sort of seen as like this thing that you can just kind of turn on. And the truth is, like, there are so many parts of the machine that you have to get going, and it makes it very difficult. And so that's what was really appealing to me, is this ability to almost think of myself as a photographer, but apply a totally different technology to solve that problem. Looking back on it, I don't know that I really thought how big of a thing that was that I was solving. It was more just because I was curious and fun, and I think like that also speaks to why a lot of people are on Midjourney anyways. It's fun. And it is cool to think about different images that I could potentially use in different ways, which is what this podcast is all about today, is the business side, but also the personal side. And there are literally thousands of ways to use Midjourney.
It's insane. It started, like I said, it was carousel covers, but two things can be true, right? Like a carousel cover can stop the scroll on LinkedIn because no one's seen it on LinkedIn before. But also, what does that mean? That means I can probably use it on organic social, not just LinkedIn, but maybe on Instagram or on TikTok. Maybe it's used for thumbnails on YouTube, right? I remember the YouTube stuff. It was like basically Mr. Beast had these crazy thumbnails and everyone tried to like mimic them. Then AI came along and like my whole YouTube homepage changed. It was
Yeah.
like, whoa, explosion of just craziness, which I love. I think it's awesome. Like, to all the thumbnail designers out there, like, props. It's gotten so much better. But that was one of those things where it was, I remember talking to people that were on YouTube and they were like, how are you doing this? And I was like, this tool called Midjourney. They were just like, please say more, So that was interesting. Also, going back to your point about stock photography, the biggest pain point of them all for me, I used to hate this, was when you'd find the right image and it was the wrong aspect ratio. Like, nothing
Simple
worse.
things, brother.
Oh
Simple
my
things.
God, man. So bad. Like, all right, let me take this into Photoshop. Let me like resize, and then like I'll mask or clone some of the sides on sides of the images, so that I can put a black background and fade it in. It's like I just want a banner, like I
So
don't
much
wanna...
damn work, dude. So much damn work. This is a good chance to maybe pivot to more of the personal monetization side of things. I get questions about this all the time. I do some of these Midjourney trainings for people that are trying to think about how to monetize it. I know you're getting that too. What are some of the ways, like, let's just start with us. What are some of the ways that you've been able to monetize Midjourney? And then we can kind of get into thinking a little bit broader across maybe the listeners and how they might think about it.
There's obviously the content. There's content that you can sell on educational side of things. That's one. I think corporate training is very interesting because everyone here that's listening potentially has been in either some role or another for probably many years, or at least knows a job function very well. So it plays well for me when I look at corporate training opportunities where, there's teams, creative teams, things like that are interested in Midjourney. They don't know how to use it. They don't know how to like really leverage it in their workflow. So something like storyboarding, right? It's like I fell into that. I knew agencies used it. I didn't realize how important it was to a lot of agencies, how often and how many they're doing. So that was something that I had just developed to do basically for Runway. I wanted to make Runway stories and make them cohesive, but I was making storyboards. I started getting reached out to like, oh, can you teach our team how to make storyboards? I was like, is this a thing? There's little problems in every workflow that you can solve. If you have an area of expertise, anything that's creative oftentimes, right? Whether that's in the ad process, the email process, whether that's in, presentation design, whether that's in whatever the business is, creating marketing materials, things, and anything. There's a workflow that specifically is struggling somewhere. And if you can figure that out with a tool like Midjourney and then train someone how to do it, they will pay you. They will pay you oftentimes what that's worth. So you look at also from a structuring standpoint, there's obviously companies that if you go in there and save them 2 weeks worth of time, what is that worth to them? So you can solve problems creatively with the tool, and corporate training is available, but that's just one thing. I mean, there's number of other ways to monetize, but
Okay, I mean, like that's a great starting point. Like we both kind of started with the digital productization. That felt kind of like a very organic thing because I think you and I probably both realized relatively quickly that not many people were as far along in the learning process as we were at that time. I think my biggest mistake early on was thinking, oh, everybody's jumping on this. And then as I started to share more and more, like I quickly realized like, no, people may have been in the tool and generate a few images, but they don't know the ins and outs, right? So then I took that as an opportunity. It's just like, well, if that's the case, like I gotta bring them along. I gotta lay down the bridge and bring them from beginner to normal user, right? And there's a ton to go into. So digital products, there are individual verticals and niches that you could, put a digital product out just on a course on that. Real estate, architecture, food. So that could be its own course. So you think about like digital products right now are awesome because if you've got any sort of community or following, because it's, again, that front-loaded work. You do 90% of it up front, you're not touching it again. And guess what? Just passive income rolling in. And so that's an easy way to set it up. But there are just so many other ways like to think about. I'll just run through a few of these that I wrote down too. I was just kind of going through some of this stuff. But you mentioned sort of swag, right? Like putting this on t-shirts, hats, sock, any sort of apparel. You've got digital art prints, you've got icon illustration packs, you've got prompts, you've got, personal brand visual identity creation, you've got portraits and avatars, you've got album art, you've got custom wedding invitations, stationery, pet portraits, what are we talking? Concept art for game developers. I know people that, like especially when you're in the rating images in Midjourney, you see a lot of those coloring books. Like people are doing books, illustrations. Like there's whole markets for that. It literally is endless. So think about specifically what you want to focus in within there because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of options. And if you think very distinctly about where there's low competition, which in a lot of ways there is right now, go in on it. Give it a shot.
There's, if you want to go look at a great place to where Midjourney is probably super applicable, it's Etsy. You go on there and you look at kind of the top sellers, what they're selling, what kind of designs work, things of that nature. I'm sure, you go in there and look, there's a billion ideas, and I'm sure you can also siphon or filter out kind of what the hot product categories are, what the best search terms are on a site like that, because everything's really easy now. I remember thinking about print on demand when I was in college because I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why can't I just like give someone a design and they print me a t-shirt? Why do I have to buy 100? What was interesting is that I saw a lot of people utilizing it, the t-shirt route right away on Midjourney, which was kind of crazy. Phone cases, stickers, things like that. I mean, you want to go low, that's going to be low volume or high volume, low price points. Again, there's other services. I think service route is always a good way to think about providing. If you're looking to start this and make a business out of it, the service route to me is always the fastest path to cash, but also you're going to grind. You're going to grind with clients. That's depending on what that is, whether that's with creating visual brand identity, whether that's doing ad creative for them, whether that's doing website design, however. But to me, I always like to find like a very relatable niche that I can talk to, because I think that's oftentimes underserved. I think people think we're going to go really broad, like, oh, like a billion people are going to love this. I've developed products for media buyers. It's one, for one task in one role and one workflow in the entire organization. But that one has been a calling card for me for almost 8 months now because it's just such a need. That's one function of one job in one little, like I said, like one little task. There's a billion tasks out there that need some sort of artwork. So it's, I think it's everyone has to like kind of zone into their own genius and where they're comfortable. The other thing that, this is just a hot take here, I think a lot of people try to, get into AI and go outside their means. Like, oh, I'm going to train ChatGPT. I'm going to teach you how to write like a copywriter in ChatGPT, but they've never been a copywriter before. They like don't know the intricacies. They don't know the ins and outs of what it's like to work in copy. So like maybe they've never dealt with clients before or, high volume copywriting.
Absolutely.
But, you know what I mean? So
yes,
like that stuff always
lean into your zone of genius. There's something that you do that you do probably better than 90% of other people, right? Like start there. And, I think that was sort of what we realized quickly with Midjourney is just we had adopted it so much faster than a lot of other people and actually put it into application in business too. Like if we were just still using it for fun and didn't do that, I don't think we would be doing this today. Like
No.
it would have stayed more hobby-esque. And so I think like the fact that we got a little bit of a taste of that, we got the appetite to say, okay, like there's more out there and there's a lot that needs to be solved for. That only sort of encouraged us to go a little bit deeper. I am curious, what's either the funniest or the strangest way you've made money with Midjourney right now?
Oh my God. There's definitely been some weird stuff, but I wouldn't call this necessarily weird, but cool. So I spoke to a private community, they're a security group. So they work in digital security. And a lot of them represent like CEOs or high net worth targets and things like that. They wanted to know about how to break down like deep fakes and how to like create them. So I took them on like a little ride through my crazy brain. Luckily, again, something that was stupid that I didn't even know would be valid. I put if anyone hasn't seen this stuff before, basically at the end of every carousel that I do on LinkedIn, I do an avatar of myself basically in the area or zone of whatever I was talking about. So I do a lot of these avatars and had to figure out how to do them, of myself, like doing random stuff. So they reached out to me saying, can you like show us how to do this and break it down? And then also show us how to like detect this stuff. So it was definitely cool and interesting because I'm definitely intimidated by who I was on the phone with. Like I knew that there were people there that could, basically probably hack me and send me crashing and burning. But it was interesting because to even go back and I never put a presentation together like that before. A lot of the, if anyone's not familiar with this stuff, a lot of the presentations you do are kind of regurgitated or pieced together from other presentations. But this one was totally new. And I was like, you know what? I do know how to look at these images and tell if they're fake. Like symmetry, number one. I always say it's the, if you could fold it over in half and it looks exactly the same, AI, we are not perfect beings. That was one.
Yeah.
Odd shaped features, like long arms or short legs, things like that. Skin tone is too smooth. Eyes are off. Earrings and jewelry physics. Oftentimes the jewelry is so big that it doesn't make sense. Like who would wear that much jewelry? Like hair that's kind of got like random wisps out of place. So there was, the other thing is noise. Like there's not a lot of noise in AI photos. Like you look at it, the film grain for a lot of analog, photos, it's there. Like you open it up in Photoshop and scroll in, you get a lot of pixels. But like something on AI, it doesn't have that. It's like kind of completely polished. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but that was an interesting one. I mean, like I said, I told the guy before I got on, I was like, I am nervous because
should I be nervous?
Is there CIA on this call? I don't necessarily want to be putting it out there. I don't need any more malware or spyware on my computer. I'm sure the dark web has taken over it and is watching this right now. But come on, I'm a little bit intimidated by who you got on the call here, guy.
Super cool, man. I mean,
what about
there's
you?
been like
anything weird?
There's some cool unlocks. I mean, like I think I keep going back to this art DJ thing. So basically,
yes,
this art consultancy hired me to work one of their events at a trade show. And essentially what we were doing for the entertainment of that was prompting things that people requested on demand. So they would wait in line, in a lot of ways, they don't even know what they want to create. They're just like, oh, like they'd never even seen the technology before in most of the cases. Some had maybe used Dolly, but never Midjourney. Like, so it was really appealing to a lot of people that had not even seen this stuff before. And then just like producing something based on their thoughts. So I would walk hand in hand with them in terms of like, hey, what do you want to create today? Like we could literally create anything. It could be photorealistic. It could be like a painting. It could be an illustration. Like give me a subject, right? And so we'd start with a subject and we would say, okay, like what is that subject doing, right? Like sort of building that prompt structure in real time. And then, obviously the pressure of it all was trying to get an image that they would like relatively quickly, but like that was so much fun because it's like, a company paid me to basically create prompts on the fly. I mean, like how cool is that? Right. And so, I did that for them actually a couple times. I mean, just really fun stuff. That's really cool. Couldn't have imagined that. I know that you've spoken internationally before to large crowds. We couldn't have imagined that when we started. I just actually landed a new project too. There's a bigger company whose CEO is resigning and basically they're doing this whole like restructuring of his old office for their 100 year anniversary, and he had these certain paintings in there. And I'm recreating these paintings using Midjourney. So I'm like not trying to create an exact replica, but like 95 to 99% of what that image is. So that's just like sort of like a cool way that like a bigger brand has embraced AI as like sort of like this little use case to tie into like a bigger company event. And so, it's just like really cool stuff like that. I don't know that people know this stuff about us because we don't really like talk too much about the projects that we do, but like those are things that we couldn't have imagined before. And so I think like the whole point is if you become known as a quote unquote expert, whether that's at large or in a particular niche, these things will come. And so you got to put yourself out there, create, show your work too, like maybe even put together some sort of portfolio site. That's a great way to showcase it because I keep this stat in the back of my head on one of these Midjourney office hours from 6 to 9 months ago where David basically says 99.9% of images created in Midjourney have never been seen publicly. They're just not shared. So you're talking about like the 0.01%. So I'm constantly thinking about all the images I create. Like, can I reuse these in a different way? And obviously there's only so many things that you have time to do, but that's the power of this. Like, what do you want to lean into? Because there are so many use cases to use images that you created. Like even just stock photography sites, like Adobe Stock takes AI photos now. If you wanted to do a whole thing on that, like you could go really far down that path and just upload a bunch of images to repurpose them that way. Like there are just so many things out there. So think about that. Use an LLM, use ChatGPT or something like that to brainstorm ideas for you. You'll probably find something that sounds appealing.
Yeah, the AI DJ thing is awesome. Nobody please take that idea and run with it and create $1 billion business without letting us know first, please. Thank you.
AI DJ.
I feel like that's how many conferences do you think go through Vegas on a daily basis? I can't even imagine. It just like seems like the perfect place for a business like that to be set up and to be utilized at every single one of those shows for something. Now, the other side of it is I do remember someone. This is even going back, like way back, going into that space though. Was like trade show booth design where they were like, oh, we're doing like this special activation for XYZ brand. Can you create like a thought starter of some of the ways that it could look? Which I was like, that's a unique idea. I mean, how much budget do you have? Because those things cost a ton. They're just like, don't worry about it. It's like, all right, cool. So let's let's throw some crazy stuff in there. And it was really interesting that was a use case because again, starting point of design. I mean, a lot of architects reach out. That's another interesting one. I'm sure you saw that over the course of time. They're like, how can we utilize this? I'm like, again, to me, it's always going to be about internal usage. That's just how I'm wired because I just want everyone to get their job done, without having to want to kill themselves. So that's kind of the idea where I'm like,
that's sweet of you, by the way.
I know that's where this whole thing came from. I was like, I can't have my team quit because they just stacked with work all the time.
I mean, and agencies are a grind anyway. I mean, agencies are a grind. I mean, and so when you unlock something like that, dude, that's got to be a huge morale booster.
Massive. Plus also the creative freedom of expression that they then have to go and do whatever they want when they want. It's a good exercise, right? Until then you're just designing in Illustrator and you're designing, maybe sketching. But this is another way to get a quick fix of creativity if you need it.
I thought the other cool thing that you implemented over there, and you didn't get into it in this story, but this was before rooms were around, but Discord, maybe you had a channel, but you guys were all creating together. So it's this idea that teams can collaborate in a space. And that's why I think you and I have at least dabbled and talked about rooms. They really don't get talked about that much, but if you're a team or an organization and you're utilizing Midjourney, that's a complete game changer. You can literally ideate and iterate in real time. And let's just say Rory puts in a prompt and I'm in the same room. I can very subtle or very strong his image, right? I could upscale this, or I could look at his prompt structure and adapt that to what I have in mind, right? So that is a breeding ground for creativity and I would say efficiency at the same time, because you're obviously working together in real time to align yourselves with what you have in mind, but also bringing in the creative liberties into one spot to connect the dots. So man, that's so underutilized, dude. But I thought that was genius for you guys even early on in the Discord channel piece.
Because I'm all about fun, right? I don't think I'm going to get anyone to do extra work unless it's fun. So, if someone told me when I was 27, hey, you're going to go learn a new tool because you have to, I'd be like, I hate you. That's just my mentality. You're going to spend 5 hours a day learning a new tool while also doing your job. I'd be like, F off. right?
It's got to be fun, dude. It's got to be fun, right?
So when we make the daily prompt challenge, like make yourself a, an 80s kung fu movie poster, like that's, put yourself into an 80s kung fu movie poster. Like, and that's the daily challenge. It's not like go create a product mock-up for a skincare brand. It's like, that stuff that comes. But when you're doing things like that, like make yourself as a Shrek character or something that was like stuff that was like so stupid, but it was funny. It was like a way to get everyone sort of like jazzed about the day and like just getting like actually doing something on this tool. But again, you send people down that path for 20 minutes, they already love it. It's like, it's not like they start going off in their own direction. Like, oh, I did that, but I also created this. It's like, oh, sick. So it opens up opportunities. We found more stuff playing around than we did like working on projects, if that makes sense. That was to me probably the best part of it, was like just people either misprompting or like misunderstanding what the topic was and like going in a totally different direction. And we'd be like, well, that's cool. Like, let's catalog that one, for next time. But the operational side, right? We look at prompt and talking about going back to like full circle at the beginning here. Phil Maggs over at Superside, when he first talked to me, he told me they were doing something very interesting with their clients and how they were basically utilizing those shared channels. They had built an integration into Discord. So whenever a Midjourney image was approved by a client, they went back and they starred or they liked one of those images in Discord, which they set up like basically a Zap or an integration into either a spreadsheet or their own custom LLM, where it then went and cataloged all those prompts basically as approved prompts for their clients, so that then anyone on the team could access those and go back and utilize them because they'd already been approved. You can iterate off them, build off them. So think about how small of a piece that is, but how much impact that could have in terms of time and efficiency. This is what we're talking about. When you look at this stuff, it's not, we're going to go create billboards immediately with Midjourney. We're going to catalog prompts. Sounds so boring, but like compounded over time makes a ton of difference.
It's even hard to fathom the ROI because in a lot of ways, you're saving headcount. You could make that argument for starters. So you're talking about some sort of yearly salary table stakes. Like you additionally can save the expense of benefits and a salary for a business by using a tool like this on the size of a team. Really, I would say almost any size of a team.
Yeah.
And then depending on like how many assets you're creating, like an agency, obviously that's probably more so the case. But even on my team, like we weren't ever going to hire a designer for a company that is a Series A, Series B startup. That's not going to happen until, late Series B, Series C, like when you've raised more money, when you've got higher ARR coming in from a revenue standpoint. So like you start there. Then you talk about all this time. In my example, it was creating these images in almost like this infinite bottomless library of custom on-brand images because I took that front-loaded time, built those templates out, and I could just run those whenever I wanted because I knew they worked, right? And I could just add to it. And it got to the point where you could just copy-paste, re-roll. Okay, like what are my 10 favorite out of here? And then boom. So I mean, like that in itself from a time perspective, money perspective, and the other thing I like to point out is like creative compromise perspective. When you have a tool like Midjourney, you don't have to compromise on some of the creativity. You can put some absurd, unique, attention-grabbing, scroll-stopping imagery together that you don't have to go find. And chances are, if it already exists and it stops the scroll, somebody's probably already used it. So these are unique things that, like headcount, you've got salary, like ROI on the time, the money, the creative compromises. I mean, those things are just so big. It's hard to even convince people how big they are.
It's also, there's intangibles too. Like I talk about a lot of times, there's team turnover in agencies, right? Like if anyone works for an agency, there's turnover. It happens all the time. It's a lot of young people. You don't get paid a lot. The hours are crazy. And, you jump at opportunities. So there's always like this 3-month ramp up for whoever new is starting, but that there's like a loss. There's like basically like a loss there. So not just from a body perspective, but from a finance perspective. And then that work gets dispersed to people who then get more overworked, who are already overworked. So how do we basically, essentially like that was the problem. Like, how do we fix that? Like, how can we make something even from an onboarding perspective for a new employee to get them ramped up quicker? So this stuff, they can just jump right in, even if that's working on small pieces of the AI stuff to get them moving, so they could really get up to speed quickly and get functioning better. If you save a month on that, it's insane. 2 months instead of 3, That's a lot less. You're going to lose business a lot of times. You lose account managers, you lose strategists, you lose business. People like working with the people that they've worked with. The other thing was like revisions, right? Like there's one metric that was the key indicator in the whole thing, which is why we started this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Revisions, because it's killer. And anyone who's worked in agencies before, it, because there's nothing worse from a designer perspective, I think, than you've created like this Michelin star meal of a design, and then you hand it over to the client and they come back with a ton of red lines and it ends up looking like, a McDonald's hamburger. So there's nothing more soul sucking, because I don't think art was supposed to be produced at this volume, right? Like when you think about creating, like art is always like, it took a long time. You spent a lot of time, you put a lot of emotion into it. Now it's just like soulless, lifeless volume a lot of the times. I don't care what anyone says. Sorry, hot take. Like your marketing assets, they're not Da Vinci's. Unfortunately, that's the case. You're there to sell other people shit. So let's get real. We're not supposed to produce at that much volume. It's just like it doesn't make sense to our psyche having that art criticized all the time by oftentimes like CFOs or someone who's never
no skin in the game,
never drawn a stick figure in their life. It like kills you. So again, like that's why I'm thinking about how can this be better? How can we work on revisions as the single metric? Take that from, because we're doing 900 designs a month. If that's 3 rounds of revisions per, which is what it was 3.4 rounds of revisions. We tracked it. That's 2,700 plus designs for a very small set of designers. That's unsustainable over the course of the year.
Revisions, the more revisions, the less time you spend with other clients, right? So, or new clients for that matter. That could also affect how much revenue you bring in from a larger perspective too, right? Like optically, you could look at it like that and say, okay, we can only handle this many clients because our operations are X. Yeah. And so that's pretty fascinating. I think you made some really good points there. And, just historically, they say that art and design and great architecture was created in times where there wasn't war. So when when their country was not at war, they had all this extra time. And that is, I think, the real nail in the coffin to your point of you don't have that luxury. And marketing in general, I would say, just kind of gets shit on, in a lot of ways, because it can be seen as an arts and crafts department, but we also realize how important those quote unquote arts and crafts are. And so you have to balance this really thin line of how much time should we actually be spending here in order to produce a quality that's good enough. It's never going to be perfect, but is good enough to exceed expectations, not necessarily just meet them too at the same time. And so I just think that's a fascinating point, maybe even to just wrap up with here in terms of how you operationalize. Look at that. Operationalize.
Nailed it.
Woo. I got it that
wow.
time. But that's really how you could be thinking about this in terms of the ROI you're bringing. And if you are going to use this, you are going to use AI image generation, Midjourney, things for both personal or business case, you are going to have to show ROI. So in order to get, Midjourney expensed and to integrate in a new technology or workflow or operationalization, look at that. You're going to have to prove your case. You're going to have to prove your case, right? Especially if you're early on in the AI adoption phase as a company. So I think we really kind of tied all that together in a weird, fun, funky,
roundabout,
ad hoc
it works.
way. Yeah.
It works. Guys, we still don't know what we're doing. We're just throwing this stuff together. Like I said, give us a break. But the one last thing on that before, I got a little heated on that art department piece of it, and the revisions. Oftentimes, I think people are too soon to cut these ideas too because of that static ROI sort of mentality where the CFO looks at the P&L and says this is the way that it is. It's not making us any money. Cut it. Right now, for us, because we let it run, there was intangible effect that happened long term because our revisions dropped. Right. That means our designers were less overloaded. They had more time to get ahead of projects instead of just executing on the fly every single day because they had to. Left more time for strategy and communication with our clients. Our clients then, in turn, because they were happy, stayed longer. So you look at that, and we think we added 1.6, I think it was 1.6 additional months to our average retainer, not average retainers, our average monthly revenue from our clients. So they stayed, instead of 6 months, they stayed 7.6 months. So that might seem like a very small number, but you extrapolate that across X amount of clients, that's the ROI. That's where it starts to compound significantly. So sometimes it might look like we paid $300 for people to use Midjourney, and we did not see $300 of return this month. It's like, dude, look further.
Are you sure? Right.
Yeah.
And I like that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is a mindset that's all too common when you get into this revenue growth at all costs sort of mindset from a business standpoint. Is what is the ROI?
Yeah.
What's the hard number? Well, you can't tie everything directly to ROI. Some things you can tie indirectly. Sometimes it's more about the return on the objectives themselves. There are other things that are ROI that aren't ROI. And so, it may not be super clear. And I think maybe the point is this, right? Like if you're going to think about using this, or you are using this in either capacity, personal or professional, document it. Track things, like become a nerd with that stuff. Like I think the fact that you guys tracked revisions and then lifetime value for the customer, I mean, those are game-changing stats to bring to any C-suite executive level person. And then obviously, like if you were on the personal side or trying to sell something to clients for yourself, like those are great numbers to show and provide credibility and sustainability for your approach there. So both things are super important, but I think that's a great way to wrap it up,
Wrap it up. I dig it. Get my shot into the CFO every once in a while. Feels good.
Stick it to the man.
My least favorite. Sorry, guys. Being honest. So,
well, sure,
yeah, man. I think there's some real tangible information in there that you can go take and apply, especially on, some of the metric side, some of the stuff that Drew was talking about in terms of optimizing internally and what you can do even with a very small team and a very limited budget. So, yeah, man, I'm looking forward to the next time we do this. Hopefully we'll have maybe a little 6.5 action, maybe some live. Who knows?
I like it. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe by the next time we do this, we're going to have something. By the way, just a little anecdote here. On office hours Wednesday, they said it's not going to be 6.5. They're going to do a 6.1 and a 6.2.
Oh.
Because they think they're going to like basically divide the differences in the versions. One is going to be focused, I think 6.1 is going to be focused more on like the clarity, coherence, and then 6.2 is going to be something a little bit more, it's going to be built on top of the training data that they get back, the information and the data and the insights that they get back from one. So they're trying to ship that pretty soon, but no 6.5, 6.1, 6.2. We'll see. But
whatever.
Hey guys, we appreciate you joining us. If you haven't already, follow the show, subscribe to us on YouTube, all the things. We love your support. We appreciate all the kind things people have said so far in our journey, and we'll keep things rocking and rolling, man. We'll catch you guys next time.
See ya.